Shri Prabhupada ki jai. So we are seeing the second chapter of this book, Beyond Birth and Death. In the first chapter, Srila Prabhupada told us about how we are the souls, not this body, and how through various logical ways, like when a person dies, we can actually understand that we are the soul. But what stops us from understanding that we are the soul? It is sense gratification. The desire to gratify this body, the desire to, seek for comforts of this body, that stops us from understanding that we are the soul and not this body. And therefore, there's a need of some rules. Prabhupada gives an example of the government. Government also has some rules where the citizens have to follow it. So similarly, Lord's universal government also, there's some rules by which we follow. We can come to the understanding that we are not this body. Srila Prabhupada gave another example of a diseased person. The person is diseased, he does not have appetite, he cannot eat. Although food is very nourishes, but the person is not hungry for it. So what he has to do? He has to get better first. When he gets better, then every facility is there in life. So all of us are in one sense a disease condition. We are thinking ourselves this body. So first we have to come to that stage. So that's the first chapter, speaking how we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. We have to elevate ourselves to spiritual consciousness. Prabhupada spoke a lot about consciousness. Consciousness is the symptom of the soul. So that was the first chapter. Now, second chapter, it's called Elevation at Death. So after having understand that we are spirit souls beyond this body, now where do we go after death? Because death is inevitable for everything that is living, right? So Prabhupada begins, Elevation at Death. There are different kinds of transcendentalists who are called yogis. So here he gives a few different definitions or denominations of it. Hatha yogis, jnana yogis, dhyana yogis, bhakti yogis. These first three, Hatha Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, sometimes called Ashtanga Yoga. So they are more or less inadvertently similar. It's just that Hatha Yoga is generally known because it's very strict or stringent. It is hard, right? Dhyana has emphasis on meditation. Ashtanga is the entire 8 process. They're one in the same. And Srila Prabhupada says, and all of them are eligible to be transferred to the spiritual world. So these are all transcendentalists. Why? Because their aim is to be detached from this material world. So we see very carefully that Prabhupada does not list the karmis, those who are practicing karma kanda, the karma yogis. Because karma yogis, their desire is that they want to enjoy or remain within this material sphere. But all the others, the jnanis as well as the yogis or even the bhaktas, they want to go into the spiritual sphere. Now, Prabhupada will give 2 definitions of the word yoga in this next one paragraph. Yoga means to link up. Yoga means to connect. And the yoga systems are meant to enable us to link with the transcendental world. As mentioned in the previous chapter, originally we are all connected to the Supreme Lord, but now we have been affected by material contamination. That's what we discussed in the first chapter. The process is that we have to return to the spiritual world, and that process of linking up is called yoga. So yoga is the connection. We want to connect to God. In all religions in this world, current modern day religions as well, everyone agrees that this world is not our place. Everyone, every religion, every religious book speaks how we have to transcend this world and go to the spiritual world. So it's a similarity, right? But somehow or other, everyone living in this world wants to just hold on to this world forever. Then Prabhupada says another meaning of the word yoga is plus. In Hindi or in Sanskrit, they use yoga. Yoga means to plus, to add, yoga. So yoga means connect, yoga means plus. So Prabhupada says, at the present moment, we are minus God. We are not God conscious, right? Or minus the Supreme. When we add Krishna or God to our lives, this human form of life becomes perfect. So yoga simply means to connect to the Supreme. Yoga means simply to add God consciousness to our life. That's what 2 beautiful definitions of yoga. At the time of death, we have to finish the process of perfection. So this whole human life, actually, if someone asks, what is the purpose or what is the goal of human life? The human life is a beautiful endeavor or journey towards perfection, right? So we have to finish or complete this process of perfection. During our lifetime, we have to practice the method of approaching that perfection so that at time of death, when we have to give up this material body, that perfection can be realized. So now Prabhupada quotes a verse from Bhagavad Gita 8th chapter. Like we discussed yesterday, this entire book are from lectures of Srila Prabhupada in 1966. And most of it are from second chapter as well as the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So first chapter, this last previous chapter, we saw how everything was quoted from the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So in this, there'll be a lot of quotations from the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, like this verse. So let's see this verse. Prayana kale manasa chalena. Prayana kale, a time of death, the mind, manasa, is achala. It's all, once mind is very fixed. Chala means moving. Achala means sometimes mountains are called achala, right? Himanchala, they call like that, right? So that means which doesn't. Arunachala, that mountains which do not move. So here, prayana kale, a time of death when the mind is very fixed. Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bhruvormadhye pranam avesha samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam. If he can concentrate in his middle of the brows, the omkara, he can actually focus on the Lord. Then when he gives his body, he will leaves his body, he actually will achieve the Supreme Lord. So it is a process of yoga, okay? Or what the Gyanis or the Yogis, they practice. One who at time of death fixes his life air, prana, between the eyebrows and full of devotion engages in remembering the Supreme Lord will certainly attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a method mentioned in Gita, how to leave the body. Prabhupada continues, just as a student studies a subject for 4 or 5 years and then takes his examination, receives a degree, similarly with the subject of life. Life is a subject. If we practice during our lives for the examination at time of death, and if we pass the examination, we are transferred to the spiritual world. Our whole life is examined at time of death. As they say, life is preparation, death is the examination, right? So people just go through life not knowing what is the purpose of life. The whole entire purpose of life is to sit for the exam at time of death. What is that exam? It's an open book exam because the questions are already known. If we can actually think about Lord, if we actually develop loving sentiments for Lord, then we pass the exam. You pass the exam, where do you go? You go back to spiritual world. If you fail the exam, oh, you have to retake the paper again. So another quotation from Bhagavad Gita. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. So this is the rule of transmigration. This is the rule of what happens to us at death. Whatever state, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam, whatever one remembers at time of death, tyajante ante kalevaram, when you're leaving this body, kalevaram means body. Whatever one remembers when leaving this body, tam tam evaiti kaunteya, certainly they'll receive that only. This is the rule of this material world. Okay. So Prabhupada here, there's a Bengali proverb that states, whatever one does for perfection will be tested at time of death. Right? Whatever we have done in this life, death is the perfection, the test for it. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has described what should do when giving up this body. For the dhyana yogi, the meditator, Sri Krishna speaks the following verse. So before that, let's look at this principle of remembering something at time of death and then achieving it. So Bhagavad Gita has a very beautiful prints. You can see here, these are the photos that you'll find in Bhagavad Gita. Here's a man who's eating meat, loves the taste of flesh and blood. And nature says that, oh, you have a human body, which is a clean body, a aristocratic life. You are meant to eat fruits and grains and nuts and drink milk and this and that. No, very refined way of living. Eat sweets and so on. But here you are liking to eat flesh, rotten things. So fine. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajante ante kalevaram. This is what you remember. And when the time of death, if you remember just, your steak or whatever, then one becomes a tiger. Similarly, one who's eating, indiscriminately throughout his whole life. So at time of death also, that is what one remembers. Becomes a pig. Someone who, wants to just expose themselves. Okay, fine. Next life, you become something which totally exposes themselves, like a tree. One who just wants to sleep away their life. Okay, next time you'll have an animal birth. So that in this way, it facilitates. Nature facilitates. If someone wants, you see another picture here from the bottom side, someone behaves so shamelessly like a dog, you become a dog. Someone is so gluttonous, they become like a pig. And someone who has done a little good fortune, a good charity, okay, they get to enjoy the heavens, but still that is temporary. as we'll see. But someone who has done bhakti their entire life, oh, then they go back home back to Godhead. And the same thing they've been doing bhakti in this life, they'll continue doing bhakti in all lives also, in future lives. Right? So this is the principle. And we see this every day in our lives. The whole day when you act, you're acting, you're doing so many things in the day. At night when you sleep, all that memories come into your head, correct? So that is just one day. Now imagine your whole lifetime of accumulating thoughts and memories and ideas and impressions. All that will come at time of death. So therefore, we should be very careful to clean the mind with Krishna conscious thoughts and Krishna conscious activities, so that even at the time of death, when we have no control over the thought process, that time at least what we will think of good things. So this is the verse that is mentioned for the yogi or the meditator. So how he should actually leave his body. Yat aksharam veda vidvo vadanti vishanti yat yatato vitaraga yat icchanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe sarvadvarani samyamya manohridi nirudhya cha murdhyani adhyatmana paranam astito yoga dharanam. Person learned in Vedas who utter the Omkara, Om, and who are great sages in the renounced order enter into Brahman, Brahmajodi. What is Brahmajodi? We have seen this before in our earlier readings. Brahmajodi is the effulgence, the light that is emanating from the bodies of the Lord. Okay. Desiring such perfection, one practices celibacy because one becomes beyond this body or try to rise above this body. I shall now explain to you the process, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, by which one may attain salvation. The yogic situation is that of detachment from all sensual engagements, closing all the doors of the senses and fixing the mind on the heart and the life air at the top of the head. One establish himself in yoga. So Prabhupada is first going to present what the yogis have been told to do. It's not very easy, as we have read from the earlier books. To do bhakti is much more easy. But this is what is meant. This is what it takes, basically. Like when you sit for an exam, sometimes they tell you, oh, this exam only 20% people pass. This exam will ask you so and so questions. So in hearing all this, you understand it's a very difficult exam. But then sometimes there's some grace marks or some, grace period where if you do the exam, you get better marks, something like that. So we are in Kali Yuga, taking bhakti is like that grace period. Right? Actually, it's very difficult endeavor to come out of this world. But by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it is possible. The Prabhupada continues. In the yoga system, this process of controlling senses and all is called pratyahara. Prati-ahara. Prati can be reflection, like pratibimba, right? Reflection. So pratyahara means just the opposite. So if people like to eat a lot, just do the opposite. People waste their life breath, do the opposite. Something like that, no? Although during the life, the eyes are engaged in seeing the beauty. Eyes always wants to see beauty of this world. At death, one has to retract the senses from the objects and see the beauty within, right? Don't gratify the senses with these beautiful temporary things anyways. Similarly, the ears are accustomed to hearing so many sounds in this world. But at the moment of death, one has to hear the transcendental Omkara within. So this pratyahar. You narrow down the scope of focus, basically. Om iti ekaksharam brahma vyaharan mam anusmaran yaf prayati tajandeham sayati paramam gatim. After being situated in this yoga practice and vibrating the sacred syllable Om, the supreme combination of letters, if one thinks of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and quits his body, he will certainly reach the spiritual planets. Right? So much endeavor is there, no? To focus the mind, focus the sound, focus the senses all onto the Supreme Lord. And why bhakti is so easy? Because bhakti is that every day we are worshipping the Lord, we are eating prasadam. The whole life is molded with Krishna in the center. In this way, all the senses have to be stopped in their external activities and concentrated on the form of Vishnu Murti, the form of God. Mind is very turbulent, but it has to be fixed on the Lord in the heart. So, like Prabhupada is mentioning, today or tomorrow, we ultimately have to come to this path. If we want success in our life, today or tomorrow, ultimately we have to take up to devotion, take up to focusing or controlling or restraining the senses. So if that is the case, ultimately, why not do it now? Because if we do it later, it's going to be more difficult. Just like, for example, everyone knows I need to study and get some valid degree or certification, then I'll get a good job. So someone says that, I'm only 20 years old, I'm only 25 years old, let me wait, let me wait. And he does not do anything. And by the age of 40, 50, a person is thinking, now I think I should go and study. So what is the point, isn't it? You're already closing towards the end of life. And what do you want to do now? So sometimes people say this bhakti, this spirituality, let's postpone it for later. But think about it. The whole life one is indulging. And at the end, if one tries to restrain, it's going to be more difficult. So earlier one restrains, one can actually be very happy and realizing one can come out of this addiction of sense gratification. When the mind is fixed within the heart and the life air is transferred to the top of the head, one can attain perfection in yoga. So the whole meditation, dhyana or ashtanga yoga is to channel the prana through all the chakras until it reaches to the top of the head. That is the process. Now, how long do yogis do it? 3 days, 4 days, 1 week? No, tens of thousands of years they engage in actually doing this meditation, slowly try to lift the prana to the top of the head. Okay. At this point, the yogi determines where he is to go. So here now the yogi has a choice because he is able to channel his prana. He can choose his destination. Do I want to go to the Chandra Loka, the moon planet? Do I want to go to Swarga, Indra Loka, to meet Indra and the Apsaras? Or do I want to go back home, back to Godhead, Krishna Loka, Vaikunta? He can actually direct and leave from there because he has this ability now. Okay. So we are reading as if it's a 1-2 day process, but it's a lifetime process actually. In the material universe, there are innumerable planets. And beyond this universe, there is a spiritual universe. The yogis have information of all these places from the Vedas. Obviously, they have studied the Vedas. That's why they can come to this position. Just as one going, just as just as one going to America can get some idea what the country is by reading the books, one can also have knowledge of the spiritual planets by reading Vedic literature. So it is very important. We are speaking about going back home, back to Godhead. We should actually know where we are going, isn't it? So in this life, only so many shastras, there are so many books where we can read and understand the nature of the spiritual world. Because ultimately you have to go there. How can you go to a place without knowing where it is? That means you're lost. The yogi knows all these descriptions and he can transfer himself to any planet he likes without the help of spaceships. So having said this, now Prabhupada wants to talk about how people are doing space travel or traveling to other planets in a mechanical means. And is it even possible? Can I just forego all this meditation, sense restraint, and all this stuff? Why don't, if I need to go to somewhere, let me build a ship and go there? Is it possible? So Prabhupada discuss. Space travel by mechanical means is not the accepted process for elevation to other planets. It's not the recommended process, not the accepted process. Perhaps with a great deal of time, effort, money, a few men may be able to reach other planets by material means, spaceships, spacesuits, etc. Again, we can remember that this is 1966, and the moon landing and all happened in 1971. So Prabhupada says, okay, fine, to give you the benefit of the doubt, right? With a lot of money, with a lot of time, few people, not everyone, though, you can't transfer all citizens. Few people may go to some other planet. But this is very cumbersome and impractical. Why? In any case, it is not possible to go beyond the material universe. So you may go to another planet, but for how long? One has to come back again to restock, right? So people are saying that one day. When is that one day? So many people have died in between. So the general accepted method for transferal to higher planets is the practice of yoga system or jnana system. So this is the way that the jnanis would go from planet to planet, life after life, changing their bodies. They could take birth in Chandra Loka, in the planet, the moon, sun, where or not. The Bhakti Yoga system, however, is not practiced for transference to any material planet. We don't want to go to anywhere in the Swargas or any of the material lokas. For those who are servants of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, are not interested in any planets in this material world because they know that on whatever planet one enters in the material sky, the four principles, birth, old age, disease, death, are present. Even if one goes to Swarga, one's life duration is very long, but ultimately it will end also because it is the material world. This is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, 16th verse. You see it's displayed, where Krishna himself says to Arjuna, Brahma Bhuvana Loka, up to Brahma Loka, up to Satya Loka, Punar avartino Arjuna. These are all places where you have to return. But Mamupetya tu kaunteya. But if you achieve me, O son of Kunti, Punarjanma na vidyate. You will never take birth again. So Krishna very clearly says that up to Brahma Loka, Satya Loka, the highest planet in this material world, everywhere is a place of return. It's an impermanent place. But if you achieve Krishna, Mamupetya, then Punarjanma na vidyate. You never take birth again. So therefore, devotees want to go to Krishna Loka. On higher planets, the duration of life may be longer than this earth, but death is there nonetheless. By material universe, Prabhupada is saying, we refer to those planets where birth, old age, disease, and death reside. And by spiritual universe, we refer to those planets where there is no birth, no old age, no disease, and no death. Those who are intelligent do not try to elevate themselves to any other planet within the material universe. It is just like getting promotion from one place to another, another place to another place, another place. But ultimately, you have to retire, isn't it? How much companies you change, ultimately, you have to give up everything at one point of time. So how long will you keep on working then? Isn't it? Better become financially independent quickly and leave. So intelligent person realizes that just moving around doesn't solve the problem actually. Okay, so those who are intelligent, they do not bother to go to Brahma Loka, or Satya Loka, or Chandra Loka, or Indra Loka. They're not bothered. Better just solve the entire problem. Wherever you go, you're going to meet the same thing, same issues, same problems, same difficulties. So why does it solve the entire problem? Go back home, back to Godhead. If one tries to enter higher planets by mechanical means, instant death is assured, Prabhupada says. For the body cannot stand the radical changes in atmosphere. Prabhupada is writing here in 1966. Just a couple of years around that time only, the Russians were the first to enter space, cosmonauts. The Russian cosmonauts were the first to enter space, right? And first to do space exploration and this and that. And they came back and they didn't continue so much. And they said that it's very difficult. There's so much radiation, there's so much pressure, so much this, that. It is very risky, impossible, dangerous, not worth it. Right? So this is what Prabhupada had told before in 1966. But if one attempts to go to higher planets by means of yoga system, he will acquire a suitable body for entrance. So by doing yoga, one changes this body and gets another body which is suitable. Just like when you want to go scuba diving, you're entering into another element altogether. Here we are sitting, staying on land, living in air. And when you enter water, watery element, this body cannot last in water. So you have to change your body. How? You put on a scuba suit. You put on a suit which does not get affected by water. Similarly, when you want to enter space, you put on a space suit, a suit which doesn't crash under pressure or doesn't allow compression, which allows you to breathe. So we have to change our appearance, change the body in one sense. You're putting on a new body. Similarly, when the yogi goes to a different planet, it changes his body. We can see this demonstrated on Earth. We know it's not possible for us to live in the sea, in a watery atmosphere, nor is it possible for aquatics to live on Earth. As we understand that even on this planet, one has to have a particular type of body to live in a particular type of place. So a particular type of body is required for other planets. On the higher planets, bodies live much longer than that on Earth, in the higher planetary systems. For 6 months on Earth is equal to 1 day time on the other planets. Now, 1 of our year is their day and night. 6 months is their 12 hours. This is the calculation given. Thus, the Vedas describe, and these calculations also coincide, or what Einstein has proved, theory of relativity, how time is different at different locations. So, thus, the Vedas describe that those who live on higher planets live upward to 10,000 Earth years. They can live for 10,000 Earth years. Yet, despite such a long lifespan, death awaits everyone. Even if one lives 20,000 years or 50,000 years or even 1,000,000 years, in the material world, the years are all counted and death is there. Everything has an end. So how can we escape this subjugation by death? That's the biggest question. Wherever we may run around, right? Like I said, if you change companies, ultimately retirement will be there. Wherever you may be, you may jump and become CEO, whether retirement is 80 years old, whatever, but ultimately you have to retire, right? So that is the lesson of Bhagavad Gita. So instead of working only to get retirement, better become free from work and eternal retirement at a young age and go back home, back to Godhead and enjoy with Krishna. So how to escape this subjugation of death? Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, the lesson, that is the lesson of Bhagavad Gita. So how the Atma is eternal, that is mentioned in this verse. This is second chapter, 20th verse of Bhagavad Gita. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचिन् नायं भूत्वा भाविता वा न भूयः अजो नित्यशाश्वतोऽयं पुराणो न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. For the soul there is never birth or death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So we are spirit souls, and as such we are eternal. Why then should we subject ourselves to birth and death? If by nature I'm supposed to play, why am I working? I'm not going to be happy by it. If by nature I'm supposed to be happy, then why am I suffering? Right? So by nature, we are eternal. Nature means we as souls, not this body. This body is never eternal. One who asks this question is to be considered intelligent. Like, I want to enjoy, I want to live forever. Why I have to die? No one wants to die, but why I have to die? Isn't it? This question nobody asks, Everyone tells, one day we all have to die. But someone says, why? I don't want to die. No one desires, no one wants it, but still it's happening. Isn't that a little, presumptuous, or isn't that a little forceful? Those who are Krishna conscious are very intelligent. There's a saying, Jai Krishna bhoje se bada chatur. Who worships Krishna, they're very smart. Because they are not interested in gaining entrance to any planet where there is death. They will reject a long duration of life in order to attain a body like God's. So what's the point of going to the heavens and living for 1 million years when ultimately again death is there? I reject all that. Better go back home, back to Godhead, and get a body which is eternal, spiritual, right? The soul. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchit Ananda Vigraha. So God's body is described in Brahma Samhita by Brahma, 5th chapter, first verse, where the Parama Ishvara, the supreme controller, is called Krishna, and his Vigraha, his form, his body, is made out of eternity, consciousness or knowledge, and happiness. This is something we can't understand. We have not seen any object or vastu which is made out of happiness, right? Everything is made out of earth, water, fire, air, ether. We have not seen anything which is made out of happiness. It's happiness. There's no bones, there's no blood, there's no organs. It's happiness. You can't imagine it because it's spiritual. Okay. Sat means eternal, Chit means full of knowledge, and Ananda means full of pleasure. Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. If we transfer ourselves from this body to the spiritual world, either to Krishna Loka, Krishna's planet, or any other spiritual planet, because God's abode is unlimited also. There's many planets, right? Vaikuntha Lokas are unlimited. We will receive a similar Satchit Ananda body. How nice it is, isn't it? Satchit Ananda body, spiritual body. Thus, the aim of those who are in Krishna conscious is different from those who are trying to promote themselves to higher planets within this world. The devotees are not interested to move around within this world because it's all a place of death only. The self or soul of the individual is a minute spiritual spark. The perfection of yoga lies in the transferal of the spiritual spark to the top of the head. Right? Like we said, prana come to the top of the head. Having attained this, the yogi can transfer himself to any planet in the material world according to his desire. So we're coming back to the discussion. The yogi now can choose anywhere within the material world. But we discussed, it's not no point in that. If the yogi is curious to know what the moon is like, he can transfer himself there. Or if he is interested in the higher planets like Shvarga, he can transfer himself there. Just as travelers go to New York, Canada, or any other cities in the earth. You go somewhere when you're curious about the place. Let's visit China this weekend or something like that. Now you're curious about it. So the yogis also, they because of their ability, they're curious what's happening and they may go there. But what's the point? Again, it's a place of death only. Wherever one goes on earth, he finds the same visa and customs systems operating, right? There's always a check, security check. And on all the material planets, one can similarly see the principles of birth, old age, disease, and death. So wherever we go, there'll always be a check. Om iti ekaksharam brahma. At the point of death, the yogi can pronounce Om, the Omkara, very perfectly. a concise form of transcendental sound vibration. They say that that vibration should vibrate with, resonate with our inner consciousness. That is the right way. If the yogi can vibrate this sound at the time and remember Krishna or Vishnu, Mahamanusmaran, he attains the highest goal. It is the process of yoga to concentrate the mind on Vishnu. This is mentioned by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras also, that the purpose of yoga, ultimately, meditation, is to remember Vishnu. The impersonalists imagine some form of the Supreme Lord, but the personalists do not imagine this. So there are some impersonalist meditators who say that you can imagine anything and you will achieve the same result. You imagine a hamburger and you say, oh, you'll go to God. They say like that. That's nonsense. That doesn't happen. Right. So whether one imagines him or actually sees him, one has to concentrate his mind on the personal form of Krishna. This is what is given in Shastras. One has to meditate on the Supreme Lord to achieve that Supreme Lord. Ananya cheta satatam yo mam smarati nityashah tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yogina. What is the glory of remembering the Lord always? Ananya cheta satatam. One's whose anya means anything else. Ananya means unwavering. Unwavering remembrance of the Lord. What does it give you? Yo mam smarati nityasya. One who's always engaged in remembering me. Krishna says, Tasyaham, for such a person, Sulabha Partha, I am very easily obtained. Nitya Yuktasya Yogina, for such a devotee who is eternally engaged in worshipping. Krishna says, I am very easily obtained. Sulabha. Those who are satisfied with temporary life, temporary pleasure, temporary facilities are not to be considered very intelligent. Because they're after something which is so flickering. At least not according to Bhagavad Gita. According to Bhagavad Gita, one whose brain substance is very small, alpa medasa, is interested in temporary things. Right? It's very foolish. We are eternal. So why should we be interested in temporary things? Actually, temporary things is very frustrating. Can you imagine if you have a temporary job? Can you imagine if you have a temporary visa? Can you imagine if you have a temporary car? If you have a temporary house? Right? If anything you have is just temporary, there's always a fear or tension that, oh, it's going to end, right? We have a temporary life. Prabhupada says, no one wants a non-permanent solution. If we are living in an apartment and the landlord asks us to vacate, we are sorry, right? Imagine the person renting a house also is in stress that one day the landlord may come and say, I need you to vacate in the next 2 months. And then again, you have to search for a new house, find something, this and that, so much anxiety. But if we are not sorry if we move into a better apartment. Let's say they give you a higher standard of living. Wow, move from here, go to somewhere better. We'll be very happy. So similarly, in this life, this body is like an apartment only. And every one of us, the landlord, who is God or Yamaraj, is going to come and tell us, your time is up, please leave this house. And that time we're like, what? You didn't tell me before. I didn't know this. You didn't send me a notice. The Yamaraj says, I sent you so many notices. Your hair became white, your hair fall, your teeth fell down, you have no digestive power, you became weak, your skin start to shrivel. These are all signs, so many letters I'm sending you. You're not realizing that your time is up. But if we give up this house and we get a better house, an eternal house, we get our own house that is in the spiritual world, a spiritual body, then we will not be very sad to give up this body. It is our nature because we are permanent to want a permanent residence. We do not wish to die because in actuality we are permanent. Nor do we want to grow old or be diseased because these are all external or non-permanent states. Although we are not meant to suffer from fever, sometimes fever comes and we have to take precautions and remedies to get well again. The fourfold miseries are like a fever and they are all due to the material body. So these four things happen: birth, suffering; disease, suffering; old age, suffering; death, suffering. Right? These four things we cannot avoid. As long as we have this material body, material existence, these four things will keep coming at intervals. If somehow we can get out of the material body, we can escape the miseries that are integral with it. You cannot separate it. For the impersonalists to get out of this temporary body, Krishna here advises that they vibrate the syllable Om. In this way, they can be assured of transmigration into the spiritual world. However, although they may enter the spiritual world, they cannot enter into any planets there. They cannot enter into any of the planets. Okay. So for the impersonalists, because they are not interested to enter the planets, they enter into the spiritual atmosphere, but they remain in the Brahma Jyoti, in the light. Oops, my power went out. Okay. They remain outside in the Brahma Jyoti. So the Brahma Jyoti may be compared to the sunshine, and the spiritual planets may be compared to the sun itself. In the spiritual sky, the impersonalist remains in the effulgence of the Supreme Lord, the Brahma Jyoti. So here's Prabhupada mentioning what is the gati, what is the destination for the impersonalist. The impersonalist, because they do not desire any personal relationship with the Lord, so they do not enter the planets of the Lord. Because when you enter the planets, you have to live with the Lord, serve the Lord, and they don't want that. They're not interested in it. They are impersonal. So they just remain in the periphery, in the spiritual atmosphere called Brahma Jyoti. Okay. The impersonalists are placed in the Brahma Jyoti as spiritual sparks. And in this way, the Brahma Jyoti is filled with spiritual sparks. This is what is meant by merging into the spiritual existence. When people say Brahman, merging into Brahman, becoming one with God, it's not possible. What it means is you come and sit down in the periphery of the spiritual world. You're just one of the spark in the whole light show, a bulb in the light show. It should not be considered that one merges into the Brahma Jyoti in the sense of becoming one with it. The individuality of the spiritual spark is retained. We cannot lose our individuality. But because the impersonalist does not want to take a personal form, they're not interested in personal exchanges with the Lord, he is found as a spiritual spark in that effulgence. He's just one of the bulb in the halogen lamp. Just as the sunshine is composed of so many atomic particles, so the Brahma Jyoti is composed of so many spiritual particles, or spiritual sparks, jivas. However, as living entities, we want enjoyment, right? Having that kind of a situation where one just sits in the nowhere, it's okay. It may seem nice, but it's kind of boring because we want enjoyment. Being in itself is not enough. Just existing is not enough. We need exchange. They say, humans are social animals. So we want bliss, ananda, as well as being sat, eternal. In this entirety, the living entity is composed of three qualities: Satchit Ananda, eternality, bliss, and knowledge. Those who enter impersonally into the Brahma Jyoti can remain there for some time in full knowledge that they are now merged homogeneously with Brahman. They are one in quality with the Brahman. But they cannot have the eternal Ananda or bliss because that part is missing, that part is lacking, that part is wanting. They are just staying there, but they don't have anything. Just imagine if you go to work and you have a beautiful office, beautiful desk, beautiful table, air conditioned, everything is top notch, but there's no work. Every day you go on time, you leave the office on time, you just sit in your cubicle, sit in your cabin, and that's it. Nobody talks to you, nobody interacts with you. You just come and you go, come and you go, or you stay there even, but you have nothing to do. Right? It will become very troublesome after a while because people look for some exchange. There's no happiness. There's existence. There's no trouble. There's no issue. But there is a want of happiness. One may remain alone in a room for some time and may enjoy himself by reading a book, engaging in some thought, but it's not possible to remain in that room for years and years to time. Right? People will go crazy. Certainly not for all eternity. Therefore, for one who merges impersonally into the existence of the Supreme, there is every chance of falling down again to the material world in order to acquire some association. Therefore, such people who reach that platform will again look back down. This is what they know of. They were like, oh, when I was here in this material world, there's so much variety, so much enjoyment, so much exchange, and um, uh, back and forth going on. It looks more exciting. This is the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam. Astronauts may travel thousands and thousands of miles, but if they do not find rest on some planet, they again have to return to Earth. In any case, rest is required, a fixed place. In the impersonal form, rest is uncertain. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam says that even after so much endeavor, if the impersonalist enters into the spiritual world and acquires an impersonal form, he returns again into the material world because of neglecting to serve the Supreme Lord in love and devotion. As long as we are here on earth, we must learn to practice to love and serve Krishna, the Supreme Lord. So here Prabhupada has been speaking about how dangerous it is when you have an impersonal conception of God and thinking that I'll go back to the spiritual world and live in an impersonal relationship. It is very dangerous because it lacks ananda. If we learn this, we can enter into those spiritual planets. The impersonalist position in the spiritual world is not permanent. For out of loneliness, he will again attempt to acquire some association. Because he does not associate personally with the Supreme Lord, he does not know something better, he has to again return to the material world and associate with conditioned living entities here. Because this is what he knew. It is the utmost importance, therefore, that we know the nature of our constitutional position. We want eternity, Sat, complete knowledge, Chit, and also pleasure, Ananda. When we are left alone for a long time in the impersonal Brahma Jyoti, we cannot have pleasure, and therefore we accept the pleasure given by the material world. But in Krishna consciousness, real pleasure is enjoyed. In the material world, it is generally accepted that the highest pleasure is sex. This is a perverted reflection of the sex pleasure in the spiritual world, the pleasure of association with Krishna. So love has become lust in this material world. But we should not think that the pleasure there is like the sex pleasure in the material world. No, it is different. Because all pleasures in this material world are covered or lead to pain, isn't it? Sometimes in pain, a person finds pleasure. It's a very perverted, gross form. But unless sex life is there in the spiritual world, it cannot be reflected here. So what is reflected here as sex is actually in essence, in all its pure form, it's actually love. It may not be the manifested in the physical gross form, but it's that emotions, caring, loving, and unconditional surrender that is there. Here it is simply a perverted reflection, but the actual life is there within Krishna, who is full of all pleasure. Therefore, the best process is to train ourselves now, so that in the time of death, we may transfer ourselves to the spiritual universe, to Krishna Loka, and associate with Krishna. In the Brahma Samhita, Sri Krishna's abode is described. So here's a beautiful description of that spiritual world. Like Prabhupada mentioned earlier, we need to know where we are going. So here's a nice verse. चिन्तामणि प्रकर सत्म सुकल्प वृक्ष लक्षावृतेषु सुरभिरभिपालयन्तं लक्ष्मी सहस्र शत संभ्रम सेव्यमानं गोविन्दमादिपुरुषं तमहं भजामि. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, fulfilling all desires in abodes built with spiritual gems, Chintamani, surrounded by millions of wish-fulfilling trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. This is a spiritual world, filled with desire-fulfilling trees, filled with Chintamani houses, filled with millions of beautiful of Gopis and Lakshmis are always wanting to serve the Lord. And what is the Lord doing? Lord is herding cows, tending cows, right? Such a simple and peaceful profession. This is the description of Krishna Loka. The houses are made of what is called as touchstone. Whatever touchstone touches immediately turns into gold. The trees are wish-fulfilling trees or desire trees, for one can receive from them whatever he wishes. In this world, we get mangoes from mango trees and apple from apple trees. But there, from any tree, one can get whatever one desires. Similarly, the cows are called surabhi, and they yield endless supply of milk. There are descriptions of this. These are the descriptions of spiritual planets found in the Vedic scriptures. Such a beautiful, peaceful, clean environment. In this material world, we have become acclimatized to birth, death, and all sorts of suffering, right? Sometimes people go on so far as to say that suffering is part of life. Right? It's foolish. Now we don't want to. Material scientists have discovered many facilities for sense enjoyment and destruction, but they have discovered no solution to the problems of old age, disease, and death. So science can give us some sense enjoyment. Science can accelerate death, but they have not solved death. They cannot make any medicine that will check death, old age, or disease. We can manufacturing something that will accelerate death, but nothing that will stop death. Those who are intelligent, however, are not concerned with the fourfold miseries in the material world, but with elevation to the spiritual planets. One who is continuously in trance, nitya yuktasya yogina, like the verse mentioned here above, does not divert his attention to anything else. He is always situated in trance. His mind is always filled with thoughts of Krishna without deviation. Ananya Cheta Satatam. Satatam refers to anywhere and anytime. Satat. Prabhupada shares about his own experience. In India, I lived in Vrindavan and now I am in America. But this does not mean that I am out of Vrindavan. Because if I think of Krishna always, then I'm always in Vrindavan. The Vrindavan is that consciousness. We have to develop a consciousness of Vrindavan, regardless of the material designation. Krishna consciousness means that one always lives with Krishna on the spiritual planet Goloka Vrindavan, and that one is simply wanting to give up this material body. Smrati Nityasa means constantly remembering. And for one who is continuously remembering Krishna, the Lord becomes Tasyaham Sulabha, easily purchased. So all of us know that one day or other this body is going to fall and fail. So we know, we are very assured of it. But at least we develop Krishna conscious and ready for when the body fails, no problem. Change body, I'm back home, back to God. Krishna himself says that he is easily purchased by Bhakti Yoga process. This is the proof. Then why should we take up any other process? We can chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, 24 hours daily, Satatam. There is no rules and regulations. One can chant in the street, in the subway, or at his office or home. There is no tax and no expense. Yeah, you don't lose anything. So why not take it? Like this, Srila Prabhupada is encouraging everyone to become Krishna conscious, especially by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So like this, we learn how to elevate ourselves to the right place, not what the yogis want, elevate to this material world, that material world. The devotees want, by chanting Hare Krishna, want to elevate themselves and get a better eternal form of happiness, eternal body in the eternal world, enjoying with the eternal Lord eternally. Right? So we'll end here. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.